You're listening to the Journey podcast. What is it like experiencing the world with neurodivergent traits, and how can yoga help you thrive? Find out in today's episode. Hi, I'm Petra Brunbauer, and with decades of experience with sadness, pain, anxiety, and stress, I finally figured out how to leave all that behind. And this podcast shows you how to break free permanently so you can reclaim your sanity and find the self-esteem and energy to go after the life you desire. With real talk about mental health, holistic healing, and the tough journey of coming out the other end. This is the Journey Podcast. Welcome to today's episode. Today is part of Mental Illness Awareness Week in the US. The theme this year is Back to Basics. And for this bonus episode, I connected with neurodivergent yoga teacher Janie Keiller to learn more about neurodiversity. Managing life with neurodivergent traits can be quite challenging, and many people find unique ways to adapt and thrive. Highlighting neurodiversity is an important part of the mental health conversation, and today we find out from Janie how she navigates life and helps others along the way. In 2011, Janie started yoga for depression and bereavement. Over the years, she became curious about other spiritual development and meditation classes and started her own groups and classes. In 2019, she qualified as a teacher of multi-style yoga, Ayurvedic and holistic massage therapies and treatments, working in a health spa, her own private practice, and she was looking for expansion. Janie experienced burnout in 2020 and decided to make some major changes in response. She took on a new job as a PA for disabilities, autism, and ADHD, and began her own journey through mental and physical ill health. Her pain, fatigue, low self-esteem, and paralyzing social anxiety led her to investigate her own neurodivergent traits. Janie is here to help highly sensitive people find space from overwhelm and sensory overload so they can create their own source of energy and peace within themselves by holding a sacred space to facilitate their healing and growth and providing resources to help and manage. Let's meet Janie Keiller. Hi, Janie. It's so great to have you on the podcast. I've been looking forward to getting to chat with you because yoga, Ayurveda, and the moon cycles are such an interesting topic that I don't think we've had on the podcast before. So welcome to the podcast.
Thank you so much for having me on. It's definitely exciting to start talking about the things that I've found over the past few years that I thought were totally separate as well. But now I'm starting to kind of work them all in together to find that everything's actually interconnected.
Yes, absolutely. And can you share a little bit about yourself, your personal story, and how you got into this interesting work?
Of course, I'd love to. So my yoga journey began in 2011 when I experienced the loss of my grandfather, and I was also in quite a bad place with mental health at the time. I was just generally feeling lost and out of control of my own life. I was stuck in a job that was really not serving me. It was not great for my mental health at all. And the routine that I was working, it was like a kind of shift pattern. So I was out in the mid-afternoon until almost 11 o'clock at night. And then I was awake for most of the evening, didn't really get to sleep until about 5 a.m. and then I would sleep most of the day. So it really took a big toll on my mental health as well as my physical well-being. I was really not in a good place emotionally with friends and relationships at the time. I was just having a really hard time. So the loss of my grandfather, who was a really, really strong influence, he was a really strong father figure in my life. It was very sudden. No one was expecting it. That really just, it sent me over the edge. So I stopped working. and I took about a month to myself. And of course, the way that workplaces, especially office workplaces, are set up, they don't like to they don't like to allow you space to be human. So of course, me
Mhm.
going through this emotional journey, trying to find myself, trying to force myself into this job, into these relationships that really weren't serving me, while having this terrible, terrible heartbreak, was so tough. So I had to take some time off work. They advised that I try yoga, which I did, and having really, really paralyzing social anxiety, I decided to get a DVD off of Amazon
Mhm.
and watching the kind of like bonus material, which was a chat about consciousness with the Dalai Lama, with whoever it was. I forget the woman's name now who did the series of yoga classes, but I watched this little intro video first, and wow, that was the moment that I knew there was something here for me. And also, there was the added pain of outgrowing everything else in my life. I just was not ready to kind of deal with this. So I continued for another about year and a half, just pretending everything was fine and forcing myself to go back into that job that I hated. Essentially, having this little nudge in the back of my mind that everything was wrong. When I paid attention to what I was doing in the yoga, it felt much better. But then I dreaded rolling that mat up and going back to normal life. So I eventually, well, changed everything. I broke up a lot of relationships and friendships that really weren't suiting me. I started going to in person yoga classes. And around 2014, I actually started to lead my own spiritual classes, meditation groups, and I even started to teach a lot of my friends and family yoga classes. And one time I had a friend who ran the yoga studio, and she was not able to teach her yoga class for whatever reason. She asked if I would do it. Totally spontaneous on the spur of the moment, I said, "Yeah, I'll do it." So that was, again, the moment that I knew there was something so much more for me in this. So I just dove right in and I became a yoga teacher. And fast forward to around 2019, I thought I had everything. I had my dream job. I was working in a health spa. I had my own Ayurvedic therapies and massage treatments and with my own clients. And I was teaching yoga classes, I was teaching private yoga lessons, and I was really ready to expand around, it would have been about February, March of 2020. And that is when the world kind of had a bit of a health crash, and I realised as well the weight of all of the activity on my physical body, and I
Mm.
started to have. I'd always had a little bit of fatigue and a little bit of kind of joint pain, on and off illnesses, just from some kind of like post-viral fatigue that I had from being a teenager when I had the measles, and then a few years later I had the mumps, and then a couple of years after that I had a terrible flu. So this was all still kind of lingering. And around the time of the the health lockdowns that we had across the world, I pulled back and I started to notice that I was pushing myself further than I really should have been. So I started to get terrible joint pain, inflammation, swelling. I was physically sick a lot of the time from just pure exhaustion, physical and emotional exhaustion. And that was when I decided that I had burned out for the last time. So then I kind of pulled back from a lot of everything that I was doing, which was so hard because you can imagine starting to finally feel free and that I'm doing everything that was my life purpose and I'm really helping people in the world, to then have to pull back from that because I had to put my own health first. So that was a massive, massive struggle for me to actually say, I need to step back from this and I need to stop. And even to this day, I do feel like I feel the pull of offering, more classes and therapies to people, but then I get, the little flare up of like sore wrists, sore ankles, and the kind of inflammation coming back in the joints, which just reminds me that I'm doing exactly what I need to do for my body. And although I'm not serving people through doing all these beautiful therapies that I've learned, I can still serve them in a better way. And that is when I started to live with my partner. We're now married. We got married earlier this year. So we've been living together for about a year and a half now. And I began a job as a personal assistant to help people with autism, ADHD, and physical disabilities. So I essentially do all of leg work and all of the brain work that comes from, looking at calendars, appointments, accounting, getting from A to B, doing simple daily tasks. I began helping people with that when they struggle because of things like ADHD and autism. They maybe feel like they're really intelligent and really good at what they do, but then comes the fact that they have to go out into the real world and maybe they have to pay for something in a shop and they get so overwhelmed and confused and the world starts to shrink a lot more. So that's where I come in, and that's what I've been doing for the past year or so. And living with my partner who is also autistic. He has Asperger's and ADHD. He has started to notice myself little quirks in my behaviour. That he is also a psychology student, so he has learned a lot about different mental processes, developmental processes, and of course mental illness, and part of that is neurodivergent traits.
Yes.
So that has encouraged me to then explore my own journey through the possibility of actually being neurodivergent myself. So it's basically been this amazing roller coaster of going through this terrible, terrible heartache and loss. And I've now lost another 2 grandparents and 3 dogs since my first bereavement. And yoga's kind of helped me to, it doesn't make it any easier, but it's definitely helped me to work through just feeling into those emotions, and it makes it much easier going through that, then coming up again to find my sole purpose and being so excited and enthusiastic about getting out and helping people, to then feeling extremely burnt out, just mentally exhausted. And then also coming back to finding a nice balance point in the middle where I'm now investigating my own neurodivergency, and that is also opening the world up because we're starting to look at things that they don't mean that I'm failing as a person. It means that the world is not suited to the way that I do things. So I'm definitely a lot more compassionate, and I just hold a lot more space for myself to figure this out and where I belong in the world. I don't feel broken anymore. So I love to help people go through that journey themselves with yoga, holding our hands the entire way.
Wow, what a journey, Janie. Thank you so much for sharing all that with us. I am just in awe in how you're moving forward and how you are mastering and learning and adapting and finding things that work for you. Wow. Thank you so much for sharing. And you shared with me a little bit that you use yoga, Ayurveda, and the moon cycles also to work for yourself and with others. And what is the process behind using those together?
Well, the process is actually a lot more related than you would think, and it's a lot more related than I actually thought myself for a few years, until very recently in the past year or so. I've noticed that everything is just a view to achieve balance throughout your whole life. So, your whole mind, body, soul connection, your daily life, your work life, and how you look after yourself. So, everything is to achieve balance in all of these systems. In Ayurveda, there are 3 energetic states. And there are also 3 elemental process profiles that we can turn into processes so that we can balance the energetic states. So each of us have a fraction of all of these elements and energies within us. And it's a case of just adding a little bit more of maybe earth element, a little bit more of air element, maybe a little bit less of the fire element in order to get us into that balanced state. And using the symptoms or the expressions of your body. So maybe you wake up one day and you're super tired and you've had enough sleep. Maybe you've slept for 8 hours, but you feel more tired than you did the day before. We can use this as a guide to sort of check how our internal energy is going. So we can add maybe a little bit more motivation if we're feeling the difference between fatigue and lethargy. We can figure that out from looking closely at the energetic states and these elemental profiles within ourselves. And then the moon comes into this as well because there are 2 basic moon phases. One is an active phase and one is a very passive phase. So between the new moon and the full moon, that's your active phase. That's when you're going to feel like you have a lot more outgoing energy. You're going to start changing things and looking for things to create and really build the energy up. And then between the full moon and the next new moon, so we call this period the dark moon, when just before we start a new lunar cycle, this is when you come into that passive energy. So just being aware of these things and aligning with the natural energies in the environment, we can start to come into flow and harmony with these energies so that we can support the body and support the nervous system. And really having us in that balanced state is the only way that we can start to generate more energy.
Mm-hmm. Wow. And how or why does using these together work so well with mental health issues and things like autism? Is there a specific reason?
Well, the reason it works so well specifically with autism is that there is a very specific type of anxiety that comes from overwhelm or sensory overload. And we use the body as a hack to get into the brain through the nervous system. So a lot of what we do, we're using our brain, we're using our mind to navigate the entire world, and that kind of brings the nervous system into a state of stress and fight or flight. And with neurodivergent people, they tend to have a much higher sensitivity to being in the fight or flight response. So
Mhm.
by doing that backwards and coming into our body, so living through our physical self and getting more into the environment, that is how we can then turn it around to start calming the nervous system down, to start controlling the mind so that we don't get overwhelmed with simple things anymore. And
Mhm.
the secret really is the ritual. So, of course, my own experience is things like OCD. Having a ritual can be such a sort of enslavement on your freedom and on your life. So sometimes, if you're extremely stressed out with life, external things, you look for the things that you can control, which is the ritual. So basically, having things in a certain order, having everything just the way that you like it in your own environment. You've
Mhm.
got that sense of control, but that's when the ritual starts to overpower the neurodivergent mind because they can't find freedom without it. And they're still kind of giving their power away. So the point of having this Ayurvedic ritual and routine is that we look to the body for what it needs and we can adapt the ritual and the routine. So it's basically taking the brain out of the equation so that we can start to soothe our nervous system through having a ritual that involves the whole body. A lot of the time we can feel either trapped within our own body or we can start to feel like we're completely detached and dissociated from our physical self. But having this yogic and Ayurvedic routine to work by when we're checking in with how we feel physically, we can figure out what to add in, what to take away, so that we're really in control of our own routine and our own ritual. And we're never really looking for that static measurement. We're never looking for a cure. We know that life changes and our physical body changes a lot of the time based on the seasons, for example. So we're really using this healing process without the kind of linear progression, and we can dip in and out of using yoga or using the Ayurvedic rituals as much or as little as we need to. It's really a full diagnostic system to figure out from what the signs that the body is telling us, what it is we actually need to soothe our nervous system.
Wow. Thank you so much for explaining that. And I understand much better now why that works so well, which I didn't really know anything about before. So thank you so much for explaining that to the listeners. I can imagine that if there are some neurodivergent listeners right now, that this could be really, really helpful for them as well to know about. And you mentioned that yoga really helped you, especially after and during your time of grief, but also now you still use it in your life. And can someone who deals with serious mental illness or even a physical disability still do yoga?
The short answer is yes, but there are a few different parts that we have to really understand before you can decide if it's right for you. So, yoga as a practice is designed to change the hormonal system and the nervous system. So it's important that if you have like a severe mental illness, like any kinds of psychosis disorders or bipolar, dissociative personality disorder, schizophrenia, things like this, it's important to check with your clinician if the yoga practice that you intend to do will change the hormonal and the nervous system in a way that will exacerbate this illness. It's also important that if you take any kind of medication, so that can be medication for mental illness, or it can be pain medication, or any kind of like sleeping aids, it's important to check as well with your prescribing doctor how this medication changes your body. And of course, you can discuss that with your yoga teacher as well to make sure that the things that you're doing in your practice is not going to upset any of the other really complex systems that are going on in your body. And in
Mhm.
terms of physical illness or disability, I would just like to say that in my yoga classes, I have many people who suffer from all kinds of physical illness and also disabilities. We have some people who can't sit down on the floor. We have some people who can't even stand up and walk. They don't have their legs, but they can still actually perform yoga because it is not what you do to physically get into the asana posture. It can be as simple as doing breathing techniques and doing mantra chanting, doing some kind of meditation, and just really basic, simple, mindful movement. And of course, the same goes with anybody who's not able to stand and move. It really depends what you're doing with your yoga practice and why. But I believe that everybody can benefit from yoga, even if it's simple, just reaching your hands up to the sky, taking a big breath in, and then floating your hands back down towards your sides. That can be the basis of your yoga practice, and you will start to notice these changes in your body and your mind as well from something so simple.
Wow. Thank you so much for talking about that. I do agree with you that I think yoga can help so many people, even with mental illness and physical disability, and especially because it can be adapted to where anyone who wants to practice yoga is at the moment. So I find that really interesting. Thank you so much. And could you go over some of your programs and services that you offer so listeners can get a bit of a feel for how they could connect with you in their healing journey?
Of course, I would love to. So I have a Facebook group where I basically share techniques, tools, and resources for highly sensitive people. So anyone who identifies as an empath, as introverted, or as neurodivergent, so that we can balance the energy a lot more just using these systems that we've described. And it really helps anybody to feel seen and heard no matter what they're going through with a non-judgmental space. So that's the space that I like to hold inside my Facebook group. I also have a free course, which is just an introduction to the Ayurvedic system that I have created around finding a ritual that brings in the energy that you need more of and gets rid of the energy that you don't need, just so that you can start to find balance and manage your own energy. And I'm also currently doing some sessions where we're reading the astrology charts and basic lifestyle so that we can learn to flow with the energy of the lunar cycles and the natural Ayurvedic elements so that we can avoid burnout and sensory overload.
Mm-hmm. And we will be linking to all of Janie's offerings in the show notes as well. So be sure to have a look there for the ways that you can connect with her directly and even join her Facebook group. That sounds like such an amazing, supportive, and safe space to be part of. So you can check that all out in the show notes. And this has been another incredible episode. And I really hope our listeners have enjoyed this journey into yoga, Ayurveda, and the moon cycles as much as I have. This has been such a great topic to talk about. And it has been fantastic chatting with you on the podcast, Janie. Thank you so much for your time today.
Thank you.
Thank you, and take care. Thank you so much for taking time out of your day to listen in. If you enjoy the Journey podcast, please subscribe, share on social media, and leave us a review. And be sure to get your copy of our brand new ebook called Break Free. Sending you love and courage, and see you next week. Until then, you can find us on Facebook, Instagram, and the Journey blog.